Welcome to this very, very special event for Classics for All. It really is, and what a great room. We're here in we couldn't get any lower. And I guess the Royal College of Music have done that quite sensibly because to prevent the neighbours from complaining about the noise, which is good. So welcome all, friends old and new. I know some of you have supported us since its inception, Classics for All, which is great, and some of you are new friends. And we've got a very exciting evening here, a very unique evening here. Well, you remember Michael Gove said rather famously, we think the people in this country are fed up with experts. Well, he wouldn't like this evening. Because on stage we have 4 world-class experts. And they're led, our host tonight will be Armand D'Angour, who's, as you know, Professor of Greek at Jesus College, Oxford. And he is going to be accompanied by 3 amazingly talented musicians. They're easy to remember because their surnames go ABC. It's Callum Armstrong, it's Barnaby Brown, and it's Stef Conner. You might applaud if you like. When I was a kid doing classics at school, we all knew what they said and how it looked because we had pictorial art. I was constantly asking my teacher, well, what did it sound like? How did the Romans pronounce? My teacher had this theory that the Romans spoke with a slight Yorkshire accent. It wasn't, I didn't buy it. He went around saying, Iboracum. We didn't buy it. But the idea of how the music sounds, well, we know what music sounds like, but how did that music sound like? And tonight, to investigate that and to hear it, more importantly, is a wonderful opportunity. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to say one other thing, that after the performance, we have an alumnus of the Greek Academy in Liverpool, which is a school set up by Classics for All. 3 hours a week on a Saturday morning, and with enormous success. These young people come along, they enjoy ancient Greek. Some of them even go as far as studying it further at great universities like Oxford, Cambridge and other Russell Group universities. So we do get bang for our buck there, certainly. And we got Tristram May and Alice Case, who is the network coordinator from Liverpool. They'll be in conversation with our chief executive, familiar to you all, I'm sure, Hilary Hodgson. So without further ado, just bear that in mind. I'm going to hand you over now to Armand.
Very good to see you all. Thank you for coming. And lovely to see the director of the Royal College of Music right here, Colin Lawson. So thank you for giving us this space. So, as Jimmy said, we want to know what the music sounded like. And we have a lot of clues to ancient music. You're going to hear quite a lot tonight from these wonderful instrumentalists. But the basic fact is we never really lost ancient Greek music because we have the rhythms embedded in the words of Greek poetry. And this is an example here on the screen of a poet and musician, practitioner, performer of the so-called new music. There was a big new wave of musical activity in the late 5th century BC. And one of the doyens of that was this man, Timotheus of Miletus. He played the kitara. There's a man with a kitara from a vase, singing his heart out. Of course, the kitara is what becomes our word guitar. So you sing your pop songs to your guitar, you sing your love songs to the kitara, and we have some fragments of Timotheus's work, some quite large ones in fact, and they're rhythmical, because Greek poetry is composed in rhythm and sung rhythmically, and although it's reduced to something called Greek meter, actually what meter is a way of defining the rhythms of music. Now here's a fragment of Timotheus, which I translated, and he goes like this. He is very defiant. He's saying, look, I'm a new musician. I don't croon in the old way. My songs are new and better. And then he uses some mythological examples here. Kronos was the father of Zeus, of course, and he was thrown out of Olympus by his son. See the old king, Kronos, ousted. Now the young Zeus is the ruler. Get away old-fashioned music. And those 3 lines in italics are in a rhythm called ionics, which goes short, short, long, 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 long. There's music in them, in Greek. Topa lai de chronos arton, neos hos deus basileue, papito mu sapalaya. So when you heard the da-da-da-da, the Ionic rhythm, it came from Ionia, Asia Minor. This was exotic east for the Greeks. And Timotheus came from Miletus in the exotic eastern seaboard of what is now Turkey, the western seaboard of Turkey. And he brought with him this exotic new rhythm of Ionics. So when the Athenians heard it, they knew this was something exciting and new. And in fact, it's the rhythm of the opening chorus of Euripides' play The Bacchae, where the devotees of Dionysus, the women, the frenzied women, come on singing in exactly that rhythm. So we have rhythms, and many, many others. What about, though, the actual melody to which he sang? Well, one of the things about ancient Greek is that it is a tonal language. There are conventionally 3 accents, an acute, where the voice goes up, we're told, within the compass of a 5th bar bum. So when you said a word like beautiful, kalos, your voice rose on the 2nd syllable, kalos, like that. Of course, it's become a stress accent in modern Greek, they say kalos, but then, in those days, it wasn't a stress, it was a pitch. It was a musical pitch. And one of the other accents was a circumflex, where it went up and down. Oh. So the first word of Homer's Iliad, anger, meaning, it goes up and down on that first long syllable, the circumflex accent. And we have documents of ancient music, roughly 60 fragments, some very large ones, survivals from stone and papyrus, I'll come on to them in a bit, and they have a musical notation, and we will see that that musical notation follows the natural pitches of Greek. When they say kalos, they could sing kalos, they wouldn't have done it the other way round, it wouldn't have sounded right. Now, let's have a look at the music. This is an amazing discovery in the 1880s, found in Turkey in a place called Aydın, which is near Ephesus today. A column, actually it's about 2.5 feet high, and on it says that Cicilus composed a song which is written on it with notation. So this is a close-up, and in Greek it says Hoson zis phenu miden horos idiupou prosoligon esti tozin totelos o chronos apeti, which means as long as you're alive, shine, don't let anything depress you, life is very short, time demands that we all come to an end. So it used to be thought of as an epitaph, but I don't think it's the kind of thing you'd write on the on a dedication to your deceased wife or anything of that kind. It's an Epicurean idea. Enjoy life while you can. Life is short. But the point about it is that the stone is actually singing it. Here, above the words of this 4-line ditty are symbols which are actually Greek alphabetic letters. Sigma, zeta, zeta, kappa, iota, zeta, iota, kappa, iota, zeta, sigma, phi, sigma, kappa, and so on. And we never didn't know what those symbols meant. We have a continuous tradition which tells us that the alphabetic letters, you start with a higher pitch on alpha and you go down to omega at the bottom of the alphabet and it goes down. Unlike our C, D, E, F, they went alpha and downwards in pitch, but not 1 letter per note, 3 letters for different shades of notes. So alpha, beta, gamma, delta, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, and so on. So you go down, tone by tone, every 3. So sigma, let's have a look at the first 2. Sigma, zeta, are we going up or down? From S to Z? Any ideas? Up or down in pitch? No, because it's not S and Z, it's sigma and zeta is higher up in the alphabet than sigma. And in fact, it's exactly a 5th higher, so that opening is ha, son, da, dum, and above that second note, there's a mark which is called a diseam. It means it takes twice as long. So it gives you a rhythm, ha, son, and so on and so forth. It's repeated, of course, da, da, ha, son, zis, same note, but then with another mark which means 3 times as long, then down to a kappa, fe, up to iota, he, back to zeta, he, no, so ho, son, zis, fe, no. There you've got melody, you've got rhythm. Now this is from the 2nd century AD, but this is the same notation that was used in the 5th century BC, and this is what we get from it. While life lasts, shine bright, don't let anything you deny. Now, I'm not going to sing it because we've got some real experts here to do it. But here is the music. Let's hear it. That was sung in about 180 AD, and it was not sung again until the late 19th century. Now, just briefly have a look at the Greek words. So you don't have to know Greek, but you'll see these accents on the Greek words, and where there's an accent, say, that goes up on the word for time, for here, chronos, you can see that the music goes up, the melody rises. Ho chronos, arpe. And then where it says, don't let anything get you down in Greek, du, that has a circumflex, and we have that nicely represented in the melody. Su, pu, similarly, the word for to live, which is obscured by this thing there, z, you have exactly that, and at the end, appeti. So the composer has very nicely shown us how you can compose music to Greek pitches. So there it is, written out, and we can see that these symbols tell us what those notes are. The rhythm is embedded in the words with the addition of 1 or 2 extra signs that tell you about prolongation. So that's from the 2nd century AD. Well, what about the classical period? The time of Aeschylus and Euripides and Sophocles. We do have an amazing piece of papyrus, about 2 inches square, which has a little bit of a chorus from Euripides' Orestes, and it's got holes in it. So when you transcribe it into modern notation, what you get is something like, here am I. Now notice there's a quarter tone there. We're told very precisely what the notes were. So, da, 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 between F and an E, there's a tone between them. And this is a word meaning either meant, materos, and then up there, back away, omega sol, da, da, da. Now, that's not very satisfactory. So what I did is I filled in the gaps. We can tell from the notation that this was written in what's called a Phrygian mode. So we know what the notes that would have been used were, and we can also work on the basis that I was just telling you to fill in the gaps. So I managed to do that. I won't spend very long on this because you're not going to hear it. If you want to hear it, it's on a YouTube video which has now over 1 million views called Rediscovering Ancient Greek Music. It is sung there by a choir. But what I did was use indications that we had from the text to these bits in red boxes are what's in that text, and the rest of it is my reconstruction. But if you look at this word here in Greek, kathiketeuomai, it's repeated. It's repeated at a different register. So seemed an obvious thing to do, and so I managed to do the whole thing, and you can hear that on that video, Rediscovering Ancient Music. So, just briefly, of course, what we said is we've got rhythm, we've got melody, and of course we've got instruments, and you're going to hear a lot more about them from Barnaby and from Callum later. We've also got vase paintings showing us the kind of things that were done. So in a theatre, you probably very often had robed choruses surrounding an aulos player, the aulos being a very strong outdoors instrument, unlike the kithara or the lyre, which had these soft strings and could be sung to by individual singers. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Barnaby, who's going to talk a little bit about the first aulos that he is going to be playing.
I studied music and managed to get through playing in NYO and doing a musicology degree without ever being aware that there were actual surviving instruments from Greece and Rome. It just didn't. When I discovered this only 7 years ago, it was complete bombshell. There are hundreds of them. The basements of museums all over the world, they're full of fragments of ancient Greek alloy. There's just a mass of it. So this is superlative original. It's complete, intact. Okay, it was found in the ancient northern. It's Macedonia. Here we are, Pydna. Okay, one of the most important ports of ancient Greek Macedonia. And here you have, found in 1969, you can see the holes there, index finger hole, that huge stretch. Okay, if anyone's thinking of learning an aulos, you beware. These are the teleos aulos. This is a complete or a grown-up aulos. And I didn't learn as a child on a smaller instrument, then gradually stretch my hands. And you need to be quite careful with that large stretch and take it easy. And then you can see two more holes down there. And then one that's out of reach of the fingers altogether. So you can see I've put on a kind of key. I've made a leather key so I can switch the hole on or off. And that's what you find on the later instruments. Bronze slider keys. There it is. So this one was actually found complete, intact, in the put it in a kind of playing position. But it doesn't survive with the reeds. But fortunately, we've got plenty of other evidence for what the reeds looked like, including this fantastic drawing. Okay, so the original doesn't survive, but we've got an 1894 sketch of what it looked like. And this crucial constriction is still, you see it in all the Chinese guan, Japanese hichiriki, the piri, Korea. They make reeds like that, as they do indeed for the duduk and the balaban. And you can see up here, you get reasonable indications from iconography. Now, this is the first working reproduction of the Pydna aulos, made by Robin Howell in 2016. He then made me one in deer bone. Okay, so that's the instrument I'm going to be playing now, made in Scottish deer bone. But, oh my goodness, I bought 200 deer tibia, macerated fresh, okay, macerated them to stink. And the problem was I didn't know until the turner on the lathe found that every single bit of bone exploded on the lathe because they'd been frozen. I received them frozen. And it hadn't occurred to me that freezing a bone might create fissures that then don't work down the line. So so this has been kind of bonded with super glue, all right? But if you have a good supply of deer bone, then please get in touch. So I'll hand back to Armand.
Yes, so what you're going to hear now is an ode by Pindar, the greatest lyric poet, so-called, in fact, of course, poet, songwriter of the late 6th and early 5th century. We have 44 surviving victory odes by Pindar. Only one of them, his 12th Pythian ode, is addressed to a victor not in athletic games, but for the pipe, the aulos. So Midas of Acragas is immortalised by this Pindaric, beautiful, quite short, 3-verse Pindaric ode, and he celebrates not just Midas, not just the goddess Persephone, but also the aulos itself, created by Athena, he tells us, in order to remind people of the sound of the death of the Gorgons. So we get the myth of Perseus killing the Gorgons, the three heads, and from that came what was called the tricephalos nomos, the three-headed nomos, the tune, which presumably was the tune that was played by Midas for his winning presentation at the Pythian Games. So that's what this tells us about. Two verses in which the invention of the instrument is described, followed by a final, typically Pindaric, what's called a gnome, a maxim, which says you can't get anywhere without hard work. Now, just to say, I explained the principles of this in detail to Stef. She created the music using a combination of two modes, the Dorian and the Mixolydian mode. So these are original melodic and harmonic uses. Obviously, the music itself is recomposed. They didn't have notation in Pindar's time. It came about 50 years later. So it is composed according to ancient principles, and the rhythm is entirely that of Pindar.
Corona, io in Cipollini cariton, capisido sentimene, pistoi coretan martires, ed te solvo senatru pois in anneo cametu, upainete, ecte te leata senin etoi samerot, dai monto de morsimoni parpytton, aileskai kronos, udo sukaikina eti aivalon, epanin gnomas domendo sector
Lovely to see in that last verse recognition by Pindar of the hard work it must have taken for Midas of Akragas to win that competition, playing this incredibly hard instrument. And I know the hundreds of hours that have gone into Barnaby's practice to try and get those sorts of sounds out of the double pipe. So we move on. Well, one thing I would say is I hope you're getting a sense now of the idiom of ancient Greek melodic sounds. This is based on ancient modes. We also have, as I say, quite a lot of documents, one of which we will be singing at the very end, the Athenaeus Paean, which has loads of actual music. What we need to do, given that every single performance in the ancient world would have differed, because of course they didn't have recording, they had different spaces, they had different resources, what we have to try and do, I think, is try and get closer to the idiom of ancient music so that we don't just repeat the songs that we happen to have notated, but are able to do the kind of thing that Stef has done with this Pindaric ode. We move on, however, to a song that does exist, again, not melody. This is Sappho's brother's song. Now, in 2014, a papyrus came to light in slightly dubious circumstances, which had 5 verses of Sapphics. Sappho, the great ancient woman poet, songwriter of the late 7th, early 6th century, so around 600 BC, played the barbitos, in her dialect the barmos, which is this wonderful slender instrument. And she also was famous for having composed in the Mixolydian mode, and we have the notes of that mode from a very helpful author called Aristides. So,
Would you like to hear them?
yes, let's hear the notes. So, what you hear are a few quarter tone notes amongst those, and then at the end you get that, you get what's called a tritone in modern terms, a large interval, da da da, which when we set the brothers' lyrics to music, we use that for particular bits of the text which seem to stand out, such as the names of gods. So that's what the brothers' ode is. Sappho saying, "My brother Charaxos is coming home, laden with merchandise in his ship, and in the meantime, my younger brother Laricos, we hope he's going to turn into a good boy." It's not a terribly exciting poem, but what it tells us is that Sappho did write it, partly because those names were known as her brother's names, and that also that I think that she must have sung to a fairly intimate audience about her family matters. So let's now hear the brother's song of Sappho.
I'm going to quickly check that it's in tune. It's good to get it very in tune, because even when it is very in tune, it still sounds out of tune. So.
So ancient Greek music wasn't always tragic, lamenting, or downbeat in that sense. In Aristophanes, the comedian's wonderful play of January 405 BC, The Frogs, the god Dionysus is rowing across the river of the underworld. And there are lots of dead frogs in the marshes around him. And he's rowing at a steady pace. Now, in Greek meter, it's called iambics, and the pace goes da-dum, 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 da-dum. Short, long, short, long. You might think of the Danse Macabre. Da-dum, 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 da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-dum. Well, whatever it is, it's a steady pace. But the frogs are going da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da, at a faster pace. So he keeps on feeling that he's being forced to row faster, and he tries to keep reasserting his pace, but the frogs are croaking. You can hear it's a cheeky sound in rhythm, and it's one that eventually the god Dionysus manages to outshout them and establish his own rhythm. But what we're going to now hear is an improvisation by Callum about the frogs. Just one thing I should say is that the play, The Frogs itself, has a lot of literary contestation about it, and the contest of Dionysus and the Frogs actually stands for something else that we learn later in the play, which is the competition between old and new music. The old music represented by the soft lyre, the new music represented by the aulos, this rather brazen instrument, which is represented also by the frogs. Of course, the frogs, nobody had ever seen this before. Why a frog chorus? Well, frogs puff out their cheeks, and so do aulos players. And so the frogs are called a musical race, and there they are going, probably the aulit, the person who directed the chorus of frogs in that play, was indeed representative of the frogs and may have been in a frog costume. So that's what Callum's going to show us.
No frog costume.
Virtuosity that must have existed in the ancient world, but it's wonderful to hear in the modern world as well. So that's the aulos, but there were other instruments, and we're going to hear another one now, and this is a good reason for not calling the aulos a flute, which it has been called for hundreds of years by scholars incorrectly, because the aulos is always a double pipe. There were flutes, plagiauloi as they were called, and we're going to get one here. Barnaby's going to tell us about it.
So the word aulos, in fact, just means tube. So a plagiaulos is a transverse tube. So this is the Louvre aulos, the reproduction of which Callum was playing in the Louvre Museum, Greco-Roman original, and beautifully studied by Stef Conner. You can see they actually shaped so the thumb sits nicely. That's the thumb hole there below, and to prevent the frog cheeks, they might have worn a fourbeya. And we are now going to turn to the Coile Athens original, which is up at the top. So very damaged. So fortunately, other head joints survive. So I should just say that whoever played the original of this was rather famous, because in her tomb, just outside the walls of Athens, there were 400 pots, tiny little pots of frankincense. So she clearly had a large fan club, and you can see the original here, and it has been reconstructed for me by Christos Petsis in Athens, and I regret to say we couldn't find any bone big enough. So this is artificial ivory. I don't know whether it was tiger tibia or elephant or horse tibia maybe. Anyway, it's the original is bone with bronze rings.
And what we're going to hear is a bit from the earliest play we have by Euripides, his Alcestis. Now, the myth is that Alcestis was married to a king called Admetus, which reminds me I'm going to be Admetus for the purpose of a small interlude. So let me put my costume on. And Alcestis, the princess, Admetus was given the choice by Apollo. Someone can die in your place. It was a special favour. And he thought, well, my old parents, one of them is bound to say, I'll go. But they turn out to be crotchety old folk. We're not interested in dying. You jolly well die. It's your turn. And then Alcestis, his wife, stands up and says, I'll do it. And Admetus is not a bad man. He's actually decent enough to say, well, one of us is going to suffer. If you die, I'll suffer. If I die, you'll suffer. So maybe it's best for you to go in my place. But the children, the two little children, are not happy with this. Two boys, they lament over their dead mother. And what we have here is a two-part chorus in which, to the accompaniment of the flute, which I have recomposed in the most basic of modes, the Dorian mode. And in the middle of it, you have a spoken moment by Admetus himself. So, the Child's Lament from the Alcestis of Euripides. Ten uclusan, utorosan, host ego kai svo, area symphora pe phlegmata.
Skitli
now this is the word that you've all been waiting for, audience participation. What you're going to learn now is something about how ancient pipe players learned their craft.
But as a total beginner in this whole aulos business, I'm going to go to a master, because I need, although we have a few like fragments, like this is the earliest document of ancient Greek music. Okay, it is an Amazon Salpinx player, and it's not her name or the artist that the painter has written either side of her. No, it's actually the music she's playing, and it reads upward. Dot, di, dot, dot, there. Okay? And it's transcribed. You can buy the two very expensive Oxford University Press volume, Documents of Ancient Greek Music. This is document number 1. And these vocables, cultures all over the planet transmit music by singing it. It's very unusual to write music down, globally. And so this without any doubt, our elites in ancient Greece and Rome learned by singing, and they even wrote it down. We've got the vocables that they used in 2 precious treatises, Aristides' treatise and the anonymous bellowman exercises. So we're going to do something from the anonymous bellowman exercises, but I need help, so I'm going to go to Stef for a bit of help.
We're going to pretend for a minute that I can play the aulos. In fact, I can't even get a note out of it, but we'll just put that aside and think of me as the grand aulos master. Te,
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 Theta,
Tetati,
tetati,
tetati, tetatito,
tetatito,
tetatitota,
tetatitota,
tetatitota, tetatitota,
tetatitota,
tetatitota,
tetatitota,
tetai,
tetai,
tetaito,
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 tetaitoao,
tetaito, tetaitota,
tetaitoaota,
tetaitota, tetaitota,
tetaitoaota,
tetaitotoi,
tetaitoatoi,
tetaitotoi, tetiate,
tetiate,
tetiateiati,
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 tetiaka. Tetiateiati,
tautonoto,
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 tautonoto, tautonoto atoie, tautonoto atoie,
tautonoto atoie,
tautonoto atoie,
tautonoto atoie,
tautonoto atoie, tetiateiati, tautonoto atoie,
tetiateiati, tautonoto atoie,
tetaitoata, tetaitoatoi,
tetaitoaota, tetaitoatoi,
tetiateiati, tautonoto atoie,
tetiateiati, tautonoto atoie,
tetaitoata, tetaitoatoi, tetiateiati, tautonoto atoie,
tetaitoaota, tetaitoatoi, tetiateiati, tautonoto atoie. とは立て旅とは解いていやていや聞いた大人とは問い入れて旅とは立て旅とは解いていやていや聞いた大人とは問い入れて旅とは立て旅とは解いていやていや聞いた大人とは問い入れて旅とは立て旅とは解いていやていや聞いた大人とは問い入れて旅とたとたって旅とたと聞いていやてきた聞いたとたとたと聞いて旅とたとたって旅とたと聞いていやてきた聞いたとたとたと聞いて旅とたとたって旅とたと聞いていやてきた聞いたとたとたと聞いて旅とたとたって旅とたと聞いていやてきた聞いたとたとたと聞いて旅とたとたって旅とたと聞いていやてきた聞いたとたと聞いてた
See, if you can do what they did, it's easy to do what he does. But we're going to finish now. So just to say, that was the Octoplegica CMOS, the 18-beat exercise that Barnaby referred to as the Bellarmine exercises. They were found and transcribed, the original, by a German scholar called Bellarmine, and so we have this manuscript called the Anonymous Bellarmani, Bellarmine's anonymous author. At least we have it. Unfortunately, we don't have the original, but these exercises, which were for presumably aulos, or aulos and voice, or voice, survive for us to do the kind of wonderful things that these guys have just done. What we're going to finish off with is a piece of music which exists pretty well entire, the most fully preserved bit of ancient music, the Delphic Paean to Apollo by Athanase. And we can date this very precisely to 127 BC. Let me just get to it. And it's on a piece of stone which is now in the Delphi Museum with a very clear notation. And it was, we have on the stone clear indication, it was sung by 50 men and boys at this time as part of a festival in which the Athenians celebrated the god Apollo at Delphi. So there was a procession to Delphi from Athens, which is quite a long way by foot, and they brought this celebration with them, celebrating actually an event that had happened 150 years earlier, when Brennus the Gaul, with 85,000 men, had invaded Greece and nearly conquered it, got to Delphi and got into terrible trouble, and essentially his forces were massacred. It helped that Apollo sent a thunderstorm and they were buried in snowdrift for 2 days. And this is actually mentioned at the end of the Paean. The Paean is a hymn to Apollo, so it celebrates Apollo, and at the end it mentions that this is not just about Apollo killing the snake, the dragon that guarded Delphi, originally Putho, the place of the python, but also celebrating the defeat of the Gauls. So it's the Athanase Paean. Now, we haven't got 50 men and boys, so we've got Barnaby and Stef to sing it. This is actual music, actual melody that was sung in 127 BC.
Although I would say that we don't have anything with the aulos. So all the aulos music has had to be created from scratch, because the stone only gives the vocal melody. So it's largely...
I should have said, the aulos accompaniment is Barnaby's, and he should have the credit for it, not Athanase.
And Armand should have the credit for filling all the gaps, because there's great chunks of the stone missing. So in fact, there's a good, I think, something like 28% of it is Armand respecting the rules of ancient Greek pitch, accent, and yeah. So thank you, Armand.
Thank you.
certainly got our entry for the next Eurovision Song Contest. That was just amazing. And I actually studied the frogs for A level. I wish you'd been in the classroom. Because Brecca Kikex Coax Coax never sounded better. It really did. Hear it one more time for Armand D'Angour. Frogs Chorus. Paul McCartney, eat your heart out. So now I'm going to introduce Hilary and Tristram, and I'm going to get the chairs organised as we seamlessly segue into interview mode. The Latin obviously drives a lot of Classics for All work in across the country, but we are getting ancient Greek on the go. I learnt my ancient Greek and my Latin and my ancient history at a comprehensive in Liverpool in the 1960s and 70s. And I was blessed. I realised it was a very narrow window because soon after I left that school stopped teaching classics. And across Liverpool, classics was pretty much driven off into the private sector. I remember once I was having a shave in 1998 when Charles Clark, Education Secretary, God knows why, but he was the Education Secretary, and he announced on the radio that, well, why are we still funding? We're not going to fund ancient Greek, Latin in state schools because they're elitist subjects. So I threw the radio against the wall, and because elitist subjects are not elitist, they are if you take them out of the state sector. And they're great engines for not just for learning and for finding out about how human beings tick, but also they're fantastic routes for social mobility and to get yourself into great places in further education. So without further ado, I'm going to let these people talk about the work we do up in Liverpool, and we're trying to get across the country in the next stage of our development. Let me just introduce Hilary Hodson, who's our Chief Executive, and Tristan May, who's actually one of our customers. And what better proof? What better witnessing than someone's actually benefited or actually, well, maybe you'll have a few complaints about us, who knows? And Alice Case, who is the brilliant, redoubtable network coordinator up in the north there.
Yeah. So, hi everybody. Just to say that we don't just do Greek, because classics is a bit of a cornucopia. And classics is for all, and everything is in classics. And classics is for everybody, whether you're interested in Greek myth as a starting point, or Latin or Greek. And a few years ago, I think people would have said to me, Hilary, you must be mad, getting Greek back into state schools, the most difficult of the lot, you know, a different alphabet, a different language. But oddly, after 12 years, we're surviving. And we do that through working with networks across the country. Alice is probably the most redoubtable of our network coordinators, but we have 14 of them. They're very part-time. It's run on a shoestring. In partnership with universities to build on the widening participation agenda. And we're beginning to get lots of young people like Tristan into university as well. And it's beginning to follow through, so it is possible. But I want to start with Greek. It's probably the most esoteric of the things we do. But we are getting there. So 70 schools we've worked with over the last few years, right from primaries at a very basic level with children of all abilities learning the Greek alphabet, right up to the level that Tristan, the glorious heights that Tristan is now scaling. So I'd like to start by asking Alice, who's our network coordinator, who does a lot more, has introduced classics to hundreds of schools up there. What is this Liverpool Greek Academy? Just describe to the audience what the concept is.
Okay, well, it's quite straightforward. It's a Greek school that meets on a Saturday morning and a Saturday afternoon if you carry on to A level. And it's open to anybody who can physically get there from year 9 and above. So we teach in mixed ages. Currently in our beginners group, we have students who are in year 9 and we have a student who's on their gap year. And they're all learning together. They all start from scratch and it's a great leveller. And they come from state schools across Merseyside, really. We've got some that come in from Chester, and they come for 3.5 hours every Saturday morning in term time.
That sounds like an endurance test to me, Alice. So, I mean, when we first came up with this crazy idea, because I remember talking to you about 3 or 4 years ago, and you said to me, I don't know whether we're going to get enough kids to come. How on earth did you manage to get the word out and I'll talk to Tristan in a minute, but how did you get the word out?
Well, we literally connect with schools and we ask them to share it with their parents, with their students, whether that's modern language teachers or history teachers or a kindly head. And yeah, they just trickle in one by one. And they are sometimes one student from one school. Sometimes we'll get a gaggle, we might get 5 from one school who want to come and do it together. But it is school by school, person by person.
But why do you have to do it in the first place? I mean, why can't a school, I mean, this is the political point we need to get across here, Alice. Why is it that we have to have a Saturday morning school? What's the context?
Because in a fairly niche subject like classics, Greek is the nichest of the niche, although I'm feeling quite mainstream after what we just witnessed. So, but the numbers are tiny. I mean, there's something like 1,130 students across the UK who take a Greek GCSE every year. And of that, it's about 130 in the state sector.
And what impact, because this is something you always get asked. I used to work in trusts and foundations, and crikey, we try and track this, because have we had any impact on the teaching of Greek
we have.
in the UK?
The advantage of having very small numbers is you can make a very big impact with like less than 6 people. So, for instance, I did write a few down. We account for 1/3 to 1/2 of all state school Greek GCSE in the north of England. So that's
pretty good.
Tiny numbers, but by producing 12 to 15 GCSE candidates every year, we're pretty much doubling what's going on at GCSE, and at A-level it's even more
So what Alice isn't telling you here is that actually the GCSE was so successful that she came back last year and said to me, Hill, will you fund an A-level course, because some of the kids are so
Well, it was
young
actually
people,
Tristan's year group who actually came to us and said, we don't want to stop at GCSE, is there any chance that you could run an A-level?
Yeah. I can boom if you like. Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't know what the acoustics are like because I haven't been to the back. I'll shout.
So moving on from GCSE, originally the concept was that we would do a 2-year fast-track GCSE, 3 hours a week, and the students would work hard to get there. But there was a student's interest this year that actually came to us and said, we don't want to stop at GCSE. Can we carry on to A-level? And I was like, oh my goodness, I have no idea. Are there enough of you? And there were. And so now every other year we do an AS level, which gives students the chance to do 1 year and take a qualification and walk away. And for a very few, they managed to stick out for 4 whole years and get an A-level. But a couple of years ago, there was nobody in the north of England doing Greek A-level in the state sector. And I think we had 4 last year.
Tristan?
So,
why did you go? Where did you hear about it in the first place? And were you at a school where there was a possibility of doing any classics at all?
Definitely not. I went to Carindus. It was a pretty good state school, but we didn't have classics civ. We didn't really have anything like Latin or Greek that was offered there. And I can't remember. I believe it was some kind of flyer that I found or was given by in like a school report or something, but I just wanted to go because I knew it was something that I would never have the chance to do. It was never going to be offered at my school. I don't think it ever will.
Did you have an interest in languages or anything affiliated, or were you reading Greek myth? Why was the idea of Greek so enticing?
Because I was just incredibly interested in the classics, and that's the whole thing of classic civ not being offered. Why it was kind of that this was the best option for me, because there was no other way that I could see myself having some kind of actual academic application in the classical world. And I don't know, because it didn't really occur to me that I'd actually be able to kind of read these things like the Iliad and the Odyssey, like even from just the first year in the actual text, and then being able to do that just within the first year of studying Greek was really impressive.
What being able to speak the language and read some of the text in the original, what does it add to your understanding, or what did you learn through that?
I mean, so much. I mean, parts of the Iliad before, you're kind of reading through them, you think this is the most boring thing I've ever read in my life. And then you suddenly read the metaphors in Greek and you kind of understand, and you kind of get to certain bits in our set text that were like Achilles when he's kind of tearing out his hair and he's pouring ash on himself. And it's just so much more visceral in the actual Greek, and that kind of understanding is just lost by so many translations that are good, but they don't stand up to the original.
So were you in the group? You were in the group that carried on and did the AS level?
Yeah.
And so what do you think you owe to Alice and the Greek school? I mean, in terms of an inspiration for what you're doing now. Tell people what you're doing now and how this has influenced your
I mean,
trajectory.
probably so much. I'm doing classics at Cambridge, so and really this is a massive help in my application and even like studying there, because my year group just like changed the course. So we brought Greek in Lent term, when usually it's like another year away. And having that kind of like basis was just so instrumental in like my learning this year, and because like, a lot of people did fall behind and stuff because I was in the prelim course because I didn't have an A-level in Latin, and so many of the people, you know, there was not many of us. I think I was one of maybe two who actually had Greek knowledge from either a GCSE or an AS.
Yeah. So it makes a huge difference. I am not going to do more than that because I think we need to move on. But we will be moving upstairs, and there are plenty of teachers as well, other people who've benefited from CFA's largesse in the audience, schools and teachers from Bishop Thomas Grant and other places. So I do hope you'll talk to them. But as you can see, we really do have an impact. And thank you so much to Tristan and to Alice for coming down from
Yes, I actually went back to my old school in Walton in Liverpool, not Woolton. Woolton's the posh end. Walton is on the borders of Bootle, which obviously you're not familiar with that. That's quite a frightening place. So I went back to the old school to see if I could actually get Latin, maybe through Classics for All. And the headmaster, this school I went to in the 60s and 70s would send 30 or 40. It was a comprehensive, not really, it was boys only, but it was a comprehensive school. Would send regularly 30 or 40 kids to Russell Group universities and about 4 kids to Oxbridge every year. And I was very lucky to be one of those boys. When I spoke to him about maybe getting Classics for All back into the school, he said, Jimmy, I'd love to. But first of all, I've got to make the schools safe. They send very few people to university at all. So this country, you know, might pride ourselves in being civilized, but one of the barometers of civilization is called capitalization. And capitalization means basically, how are we releasing the potential in our future, which is basically young people? Well, the answer is not very well. And Classics for All is small but perfectly formed, really. It does what it can, and it does what it says on the tin, and that's why I'm involved with it, because I've been involved with some other charities, and in the end, they were too big, they were too diffuse, their focus wasn't very good, and too much money went on other things apart from what they actually said they were there to do. This is not the case with Classics for All. So you may have detected in that little preamble, I've got written down here, sting them with some cash. Listen, I know lots of you are fantastic and wonderful supporters of the cause anyway, so I don't need to sell that to you. But of course the work goes on. We made it easy for you. There's a QR code. Don't ask me what that means. There's a squiggly bit in the middle of your programme. Apparently, if you've got the technology, I don't know whether you can do it down here, you can just zap that, it would lead you to a website. We have Al, which is she's around somewhere with one of those great little machines that you just put your phone on, and it relieves you of hundreds of pounds of cash without even thinking about it. But of course, there's the website you can go onto as well. And don't forget, it's the Big Give, which is a fantastic window of opportunity. Every pound you pledge, there is a wonderful anonymous philanthropist out there who's trying to make his conscience. He isn't trying to. He's desperate not to die rich, because, as you know, Carnegie said, "A person who dies rich dies in disgrace." I'd hate that to happen to anybody here. So let's support this cause. You know, people like Alice and Hilary, they're out there every day of the week, and they are changing people's lives. There is no question about that. So thank you very much for coming. Goodbye to our online audience. You're out there, scattered across the world. We had people from like New Zealand and Canada on one of our online sessions, which is just fantastic. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Royal College of Music and Colin, who's here. Thank you, sir. He's the big cheese here.